Hi everyone, my name is Katerina Sira. I'm a project director at the Peace Research and Education program at New York University, and I work with young peace builders in Colombia and Iraq. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to exchange with you, and I look forward to meeting some of you in person soon. So, as you learned in the last module, there are so many ways for us to make our communities more peaceful, to make our families more peaceful, to make our schools more peaceful, and we each bring unique skills and attributes to the table. And we can be really intentional about how we choose to use our natural attributes that we have to contribute to peace. As you think about how you want to engage with your communities to make them more peaceful, I wanted to take this opportunity to do two things. One, share a little bit about the conversation on building peace, specifically for youth to build peace. And two, share some examples of what it looks like for the ideas that we talked about in Module 1, 2, and 3 to be implemented in the real world. So this is the broad context. An important conversation began with the implementation and development of the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is a group of 17 goals that aims to make the world a better place by 2030. It looks at different things like gender, environment, education, poverty, and every single member state of the United Nations signed these goals with the promise to achieve them, including Iraq. And Goal 16 is of particular interest to us because it has a lot to do with peace and justice. And so I urge you to take a look at that goal. And since each of our governments made these promises, we can use this as a map to measure how are we doing as civil society, how are our businesses in our community doing, and how are our governments doing. And we can hold each other accountable for the commitments that we've made to achieve these goals. The other really important part of the conversation is that over the last few years, the international community has recognized that young people are already contributing to peace building throughout the world, and that they need to be better supported to do so. And this was formally recognized with the passage of UN Security Council Resolution 2250 and a similar resolution in the UN's General Assembly at the end of 2015. And this became known as the Youth Peace and Security Agenda. The previous conversation, and it persists in many places today, was that youth are just victims of conflict. And this suggests that they are objects of structural and direct violence, that they are just passive members of their community that need protection. And then the other part of the conversation often goes something like this. Young people are a dangerous group, and they are ready to be radicalized by extremist groups. And it is true that young people have been victims of conflict. And it is true that a small number of young people around the world have joined extremist groups. However, these dominants miss the really important point that every single day, all around the world, young people are making positive contributions to their community throughout the entire world. And therefore, programming that should be focused on supporting this really needs to be strengthened. I think ultimately the Youth Peace and Security Agenda also really importantly recognizes that you are the experts of your own experience, of your own communities, and that you have creative energy and creative and great ideas that can be used to build positive social change in your communities. And there are so many ways that young people are contributing to peace all over the world, and it ranges in scope. It can be a global effort. It can be a village effort. It can range in the level of institutionality that it has. So that means it could be a formal NGO, non-governmental organization, or it can just be a series of actions that aim to achieve a certain goal. And I wanted to give you a few examples that range in the scope and type of action, but these should in no way limit your imagination and how you can work to make your communities more peaceful. The first example I wanted to share with you is the Youth Strike for Climate Change global movement. It's a peaceful global youth movement that aims to bring awareness to the issues of climate change and asks governments to implement policies to combat climate change. And it's a really powerful example of an advocacy and awareness and political campaign that is done through nonviolent action. This was started by and inspired by a Swedish girl, Greta Thunberg, who at the age of 15 decided to strike every Friday to bring awareness to the issues of climate change She did this at the footsteps of the Swedish Parliament, and she called this Fridays for the Future. She used social media to spread it all throughout the world. And for a long time, though, she was alone. She was the only person at her strikes, but she continued. And just to give you an example of how much power we have, how much power social media has to be used for good. Today, the movement that she has inspired has grown, and thousands of young people have striked and engaged in creative actions in over 100 countries. And much of the movement tries to highlight that the inaction of adults, who traditionally have the decision-making power, will have existential implications for today's young people, as they will be the ones who will have to live with the consequences of today's decisions. And this is an example of a really powerful intergenerational conflict that is currently ongoing. There's a conflict of interests and priorities here. But as we learned in the first module, conflict is not inherently bad, nor is it the opposite of peace. Conflict can be constructive, so long as we are using nonviolent means to achieve peaceful goals, such as the young people who are striking. This could really lead to some really positive changes that will prevent violence in the future. I also wanted to share an example with you of a short video that a group of young Iraqis made in the summer of 2018. The link is on the wiki page, and I really encourage you to watch this incredibly beautiful and powerful example of the way we can communicate messages of tolerance in creative ways. So after participating in a series of workshops, including a transformation simulation exercise, the video was made by a mix of internally displaced people, of Kurdish host community youth, and a mix of people from different religions. All the young people directed it, they produced it, they shot it in Sheikhan in Iraq. And the film really focused on strengthening the culture of welcoming internally displaced people into a society and trying to remove preconceived notions of them. As you recall, in the second module, we learned about direct violence, structural violence, and cultural violence. And recognizing the way in which violence is perpetrated and which category it fits in is really important. But even more important is to think about how can we flip those notions and think about, for example, cultural peace rather than cultural violence. So videos such as this one can really be used in culture to connect rather than divide. And just as culture can be used to legitimize direct or structural violence, it can also be used to change the narrative and delegitimize it. So these are just two examples of how we can work to make our communities more peaceful through nonviolent means. And as you see, creativity is key. And also that most importantly, you are the experts in your own community. The last thing that I'm going to leave you with is that it's really important to remember that it's not only about what we do, that we strike or that we make a video, but about how we do it. We have to ask ourselves, when we take action to make positive change in the community, are we considering the needs of all of our community members? Will we cause harm to anyone in our community when we do this action? Are we excluding anyone when we do this action? Is what we're working on going to make our community more integrated? Will it repair broken relationships? I think asking these questions when we take an action to make positive social change in our communities is ultimately what makes something a peace-building project and not just a community development project or a humanitarian project. We really want to make sure that anything that we do in terms of making positive social change really considers the needs of everyone and considers how we can repair relationships. So in the next few months, you also will be asked to think about how you can make your communities and your university campuses more peaceful. And so when you're doing that, it would be really great to keep these questions in mind to ensure that we're meeting the needs of the entire community and that we can really improve the strength of our entire community. Look forward to meeting you soon, and thanks for your time.